Hello, good evening. I am Ajit Kumar Jha, editor of the Public Global and CEO of Power Pixar. And today we want to focus on what happened in Pahalgam and why the entire country is waiting with bated breath. 12 days have passed, remember, since, it seems four terrorists had butchered, killed in a very dastardly attack almost 26 um, tourists. And the way the attack was carried out was extremely brutal, and uh, it was completely as if the terrorists were targeting a particular community. Each of the persons were asked to read the kalma, to they, they were almost they were being investigated whether they were Hindu or not, and then each the entire attack was against Hindu, um, who were basically tourists in Pahalgam. And 12 days have passed, and lot of noise have been made. In fact, right after the attack, right before the attack, I was traveling from UP to Bihar. I was in Madhubani. And the day after the attack, Prime Minister Modi came to Madhubani, and he made a speech in English, and I was there. And he had made statements that, he would ensure that these terrorists are punished. Of course, he spoke much more than that. And remember, the speech was in English so that the entire world can understand. Although when he was speaking on problems in Bihar and what the government has done, that was in a different, and that was in Hindi. But nothing, no concrete action has yet taken place. The most important, none of the terrorists have been arrested. They have not been caught. And this is not something new. If you remember, before that, several of the attacks that have taken place in Jammu, earlier all the attacks were in Jammu, in places like Siasi. Uh, no one has been arrested yet. So I kind of made a little list here, at least of some of the attacks that have taken place, and let's kind of go through some of them. Let's take, you know, in 2016 in Pathankot, the Jaish-e-Mohammed had killed 12 people. Then again, the Jaish-e-Mohammed had killed 24 on 18th of September. Then similar attacks had taken place. Suicide attack had taken place in Kathua, where six people were killed on 20th of March. And we are talking about 2015 now. So 2015, 2016. Let me talk about some of the other attacks. Some of the other attacks were recent when, for example, as I said, in Siasi, in Jammu, uh, there were, I'm trying to get the list I had made. Uh, Many of these lists end up coming blank. In Siasi, for example, as I said, tourists were pulled out of the bus and they were shot one by one. Now, and no one has been arrested in that. So, for quite a while, when there was pressure in Kashmir, the terrorists attacked in Jammu, and there were several attacks in Jammu because, as a journalist, we are forced to cover we cover most of these, and I had seen that in each of these attacks, you find the recent ones, they just don't come and shoot. They have plenty of time. These are all premeditated, cold-blooded attacks. They pick up the tourists and they take them to some area. Sometimes they just pick up villagers and they take them to another area which is heavily wooded, where they are to ensure that uh, it will take the police a long time to sort of investigate and find out, and then they go ahead and carry these attacks over hours, and then go and hide in these heavy forest in Basaran initially, where the attack took place, and then they moved back into the forests. Now, the question is, of course, the Indian government has declared a few sort of what one would call very, very important steps, like the Indus Valley 1960 Accord that took place, sharing of waters. The government has scrapped that. Then now the government is going around. The Indian government is going around. Requesting or persuading the IMF, the World Bank, the ADB, and others to ensure that the money that they give to Pakistan, which is in billions of dollars, to ensure that that money doesn't get diverted into terrorist acts. Now, all these are very good uh, attempts, but these will take a long, long time to come down to reach the ground. And simply by doing these, can the Indian government come to some kind of massive response? Uh, I have my doubts. I hope they do, but will that deter the terrorists? I have my doubts. Let's point out there was an all-party meet in April 24, 2025, just a few days, just 2 days before the attack, and the presentation was made by the Ministry of Home Affairs. They pointed out that in the decade between June 2014 to May 2024. 2014, remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had come to power. 2024, remember, the last Lok Sabha elections were held. In those 10 years, there have been 1,643 terrorist attacks or terrorist initiated incidents, 1,925 infiltration attempts, 726 successful infiltrations, and 576 security personnel, Indian security personnel, have been killed. Remember, 576 Indian soldiers, security personnel have been killed. I mean, that's an extraordinarily high number. And this continues. The relentless attack by terrorists from Pakistan continues. We tried a surgical strike, if you remember, and this was a few years ago after when Pulwama took place. And again, that did not seem to restrain in any way the terrorist attacks that has been going on. Now, the situation is such that the United States uh, is actually advising India to restrain itself. In fact, when the attack took place in Pahalgam, the public mood was, let's go and attack Pakistan, a military attack on Pakistan. Now, obviously, that might be being planned because I am not in the know. I don't talk to army generals, and even if I did, they wouldn't share it with me because these are secrets. But the government might be planning, but JD Vance, the US vice president, has already sort of talked about the fact that uh, that that India should restrain itself so that this conflict with Pakistan doesn't become a regional conflict. The other problem is that Prime Minister Modi, when he was asked to comment about the war between Russia and Ukraine, remember his what I would call um, a rather statesman-like approach, where he said, "This is not an era of war." He had talked about negotiations between Russia and Ukraine to end the conflict. Now, if that is his language, that of negotiations, and one would appreciate that, then obviously it will be difficult for him to rush into war. But who knows what is being planned? We don't know. But what is very important is for these terrorist attacks to be stopped once and for all. Most of these attacks are being carried by Lashkar-e-Taiba. At least the intelligence reports seems to suggest that, and various fronts of the Lashkar-e-Taiba. But the point is, what is the problem? Are these terrorists, do they have a superior technology which our security forces don't have? So that when they carried out these premeditated attacks, planning for days, we have no intelligence information about this. Now, if you remember what had taken place, for example, on October 7, 2023, when Hamas had attacked Israel, where they had ended up killing almost 1,200 Israelis, and 50 of those held captive are still with the Hamas. One of the intelligence investigations pointed out that the strength that terrorists have is they rely on information sharing between terrorists without the help of cell phones. Now, that's something that at least some of the army generals in India have pointed out, that the terrorists in Pahalgam too, or in the incidents before that, they kind of have some other way of information sharing, and they do not use cell phones, and therefore it is difficult to track them. So, what is it? How do they manage to do intelligence information sharing when terrorists plan these attacks? Is it because they have local support? Is it because they kind of blend in with the local Kashmiris or wherever the attack is being held, and it is, and they have, do they, out of fear, do people support them, or is it some kind of sympathy? All that needs to be investigated and found out. But time is running out. As I said, 12 days have passed, and people want a response, and the government is in a bind. The US, its biggest ally, is saying that, well, yes, of course, what Pakistan did is reprehensible. They didn't use the term reprehensible, but I am saying reprehensible, cowardly. But at the same time, everyone is asking for evidence. China, for example, has also said that they will support Pakistan in what? In figuring out what happened, to look for the evidence. But it almost seems they are not immediately telling Pakistan that they are at they are at fault. So India kind of, although the world powers are with India, everyone has sympathy for India. If you read The Economist or the New York Times or British papers or the Wall Street Journal and others, all have condemned the incidents. But yet, the Modi government is in a very tough spot here. Earlier, if you look at when I used to be a reporter covering many of these events, the Congress government in the center used to be at this tough spot. And the Bharatiya, the Bharatiya Janata Party leaders, the BJP leaders in parliament and in other forums would be pressurizing the Congress government, or in this case, let's say the UPA governments, to take tough positions on this issue. Right now, the shoe is on the other side. The Congress, in a recent, in fact, Rahul Gandhi was there in a recent meeting, pointed out that we are waiting for the Modi government to, to take a tough step, whether it is threat for war or something else, because most of the whatever the government has announced, those are very important steps. But will they restrain short-term terrorism? Sort of restricting the Indus water, as I said, based on this treaty, scrapping the 1960 treaty, or for that matter, as I said, going to the IMF, the World Bank, and the other donor agencies. In fact, Pakistan has been in an economic crisis of late, and enormous amount of aid, I think to the tune of 13 billion, was promised by the World Bank, the IMF, some more. And the Indian government is trying to persuade these agencies to put pressure on Pakistan, that they will ensure that this aid amount doesn't go into acts of terrorism, and also to put sort of pressure on the Pakistani government. But the thing is, how much of the support that terrorists have are linked to Pakistani government, we still don't know. We know there is some ISI link, but we don't know the channels through which all this takes place. So what happened in Pahalgam, it was chilling. It was one of the most dastardly attacks, one of the most reprehensible act by these cold-blooded terrorists. But fighting terror, in a way, I would argue, in today's world, and I gave the example of Israel, which we know is a very efficient sort of power, both militarily and otherwise, and yet they have not been able to solve the problem of terrorism, whether it comes from Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis. We are in a similar situation. We are being bled by terrorist attacks. Every year, several attacks in which armed forces are killed, innocent civilians are killed, are right now in this latest attack. Remember Pahalgam? I mean, Pahalgam and Srinagar, Dal Lake, used to be at one the biggest tourist attraction in India, not only in Kashmir, but the world would come there. In fact, of late, the number of tourists going to Kashmir had increased enormously, despite the fact that the statehood was robbed, was taken away, and it had become a union territory. All these changes, tumultuous acts took place, and Kashmir suffered in the last few years quite a bit. But despite all that, tourists had increased. Now, this one act by terrorists where they killed 26 tourists, this is going to change the entire tourism face of Kashmir. And despite the new government, Omar Abdullah is the new chief minister. He, in fact, has done, he shares lots of acts, lots of official pronouncements that the Omar Abdullah government is carrying out since it has come to power. It ends up sharing information with the center. You will see, in fact, there are charges by several parties that Omar Abdullah has moved closer to the NDA, which may not be the case, but at least Omar Abdullah ends up all the time cooperating with the center, with the governor of Kashmir because he wants restoration of statehood in Kashmir. Now, this obviously we are not talking about the entire of problems of Kashmir in this video. I want to come back to the main picture, and the main picture that the puzzle, if you want to ask, the cruel puzzle is that there is relentless sort of attacks by terrorists. Most of these terrorists, as I said earlier, they used to be from Hizbul Mujahideen. Now we kind of track them down to Lashkar-e-Toiba and its various outfits, but they continue to carry on these attacks. They're never caught. They managed to slip back into the border in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Even now, all kinds of intelligence reports are coming that the four of them who carried out this attack in Pahalgam is hiding here, is hiding there, but they have not been caught. And unless they are caught, or unless the government ends up taking some kind of muscular approach, I think the anger and one would call the anguish of the people, the helplessness that Indians feel, they are always, on the wrong end of terrorist attacks, and nothing happens to the terrorist, continues to boil inside. And the Modi government is completely under pressure. As I said, the pressure from the people, the pressure that even if they talk big, the actions are, rather sort of seen as soft rather than very hard. Number three, the international pressure. The Americans, they are giving support, but they are pointing out restraint because they do not want a new conflict. And remember, both Pakistan and India are nuclear powers. So a conflagration, a conflict between the two, a large-scale war between the two, while the world is still witnessing war between the Hamas and Israel, this entire sort of Palestine versus Israel on the one hand, Russia versus Ukraine on the other hand, a third regional conflict between two nuclear powers will completely take the world towards a global recession. And not only that, worse. So at the end of it, my question to the government is, why don't we do the following? Intelligence failure. In fact, the latest report that has come, I just read, says that the government had prior information that this kind of attack was being planned. One of the newspapers, I think it's the Indian Express or the Times, Indian Express, has reported on page 1 that the government had intelligence reports which pointed out that this kind of attack was being planned in Pahalgam. But somehow we always slip. So an intelligence failure by the Home Ministry. Maybe there should be pressure on the Home Minister because he's the one who created, who entered Kashmir's statehood and created, as we said, a union territory. Now, when he took it, I know it was a very important decision, a collective decision taken by the Modi government, but he should have seen what it will lead to. Somehow the assumption was that the moment you finish the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir and create a union territory, things will become normal. But things seems to have got worse. And it seems the government is not in control, especially in control of these terrorist attacks. So as I said, intelligence failure of our security personnel and others who are investigating, they never end up nabbing these terrorists. And then sometimes innocents get sort of arrested. Sometimes they question them. And some BBC, for example, reported that ordinary people, they feel terrified when the police goes and sort of investigates them because they are not involved. So the situation is quite sad right now, very tragic. What happened in Pahalgam, all of us condemn it. But when will these terrorist attacks stop? How will these terrorist attacks stop in the future? When will the terrorists who are responsible for these attacks, either as I said in CRC or in Pahalgam, when will they get arrested? These are questions that the Modi government is dealing with, and they are caught in this dilemma. And the long term answers, short term answers, we are all still waiting for. Thanks very much.